The light flashed on behind the old Chevy, and Harold Briggs, 82, let the pickup drift onto the shoulder. Calloused hands stayed glued to the wheel. His posture held the calm of someone who's seen too much. The seat creaked, but Harold stayed quiet. Two cops climbed out of the freshly polished cruiser. One tapped the hood and sneered, "No plate, no papers, no shame, huh, old-timer?" His partner walked around the truck, laughing like a rookie on his first run. Harold didn't react. The scars on his knuckles spoke for him. Time dripped by in empty questions until the rumble of a black SUV cut across the road. The door opened, and out stepped a four-star general. No salute, no protocol. Just a firm nod to the rookies and 6 words that hung in the air. "You just pulled over the man who trained me." Silence. A silence thick as steel. The cops' grins dried up, and the general's stars glinted in the noon sun, stamping a piece of history right there. Harold stayed motionless. He took off his worn Special Forces cap and held it between trembling fingers, trembling not from fear, but from memory. If this hits you, drop a respect in the comments. There are still legends who'd rather walk in silence while they carry the world on their shoulders. Harold kept his voice low as he confirmed, "She's been mine since 1968. The officer asked for the registration, and the moment he got it, mocked the faded paper before yanking it from the cab. Retired? Sure. Stay right there," the younger one said, pleased with his own sarcasm as he stroked the dented body of the pickup. To him, the rust was neglect. To Harold, it was a road scar. With measured posture, Harold obeyed. Decades of missions had taught him that one sudden move can reignite invisible battles. The taller cop stepped forward, pointed to the bed. "What's in there?" "Wood and hardware for Mrs. Clancy's ramp up the street." The partner traded a quick look and laughed. Neither of them recognized names like Kandahar, 1978, or Medellin, 1983, chapters that survive only in sealed reports. They told him to empty his pockets. Keys, wallet, a nearly colorless photo, a notebook with a worn cover. The officer flipped through the pages. "Some kind of code?" he teased, raising an eyebrow. "Names of the men I served with," Harold replied, his tone unchanged. Some lines had stars, others were crossed out, marks that spoke of permanent absences. The asphalt sizzled under the noon sun, and the silence grew like a shadow over the trio. Each second stretched the tension, hinting that the next question might finally touch the part of the story none of them was ready to hear. The notebook hit the ground and slid to Harold's foot before the officer spoke again. "Looks like your pickup shouldn't even be on the road." Harold answered with the silence he'd learned in the barracks. He picked up the notebook with the care due a sacred book, saying nothing about the historical record that exempted the vehicle from today's rules. He stood tall, eyes fixed on a distant point. They ordered him to sit on the curb. Engines roared, horns blared, phones lifted to capture every second. "He's not cooperating," one officer judged. "Could be dangerous," the other added. The radio crackled for backup. Suspected theft, elderly male, cold demeanor. Harold kept his face turned toward the horizon. In his pocket rested a retirement letter signed by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. In the glove box, a bronze star beside the photo of the company he'd commanded. "It's just protocol, okay?" the sergeant said, waiting for any reaction. None came. Exactly 30 minutes on the wristwatch, and one impatient cop kicked a tire. "Bet this old guy thinks he's Rambo." A teenager passed by, opened his front camera, snapped a selfie with Harold in the background and posted, "Grandpa in the crosshairs." "Think he took his meds?" the youngest rookie mocked. "Maybe he doesn't even remember who he is." Harold stayed quiet, not out of fear, but with the calm of someone who's faced far harsher interrogations than the small-town two-cop show. A gray-haired gas station attendant recognized him, grabbed his phone and whispered, "You won't believe who's sitting on the curb." 40 slow minutes crept by. The cops laughed, trading sips of coffee. One leaned against the hot hood. At minute 59, the scene flipped. A black SUV with official plates and dark windows turned the corner and parked without hurry. The officers straightened up. From the back door stepped a tall man in a four-star general's uniform. He didn't even have to raise his voice. "Which one of you told this citizen to pull over?" The midday sun rippled on the asphalt. Harold stayed seated, breathing like a man who spent 72 hours stuck in mud waiting for a chopper. The cops, now stiff, searched for the shade of a tree. The cruiser's AC clicked on and off. Across the street, a knot of onlookers formed. Whispers flew. For most, Harold was just another confused soul, maybe drunk or senile. Almost no one noticed the critical detail. He still hadn't moved a muscle. "Call social services?" the rookie asked, loud enough for Harold to catch every syllable. "First we run the plate, then we track down the family," the older cop answered. The sentence opened a shortcut in Harold's memory, leading him back to dusty roads in Vietnam, checkpoints where tense kids waved rifles that decided who'd get to stay alive. A woman ran up to the officers. "This man is Harold Briggs. He builds ramps for wheelchair vets here in town." "Keep your distance, ma'am. Police procedure." The officer cut in, hiding no disdain. "He's decorated. Everybody knows him." "Back to your car," he repeated, and she stepped away, incredulous. Harold's knees burned against the concrete, but pain never surprised him. He'd already endured jungle fevers, shrapnel, and 36 hours trapped in a flooded cave. This was just one more entry on the long list. On the far side of the pump, station attendant Mike Henderson, himself a former Marine, noticed the silent profile. He saw Harold at VFW meetings. The old man hardly spoke, but when he did, the hall went quiet like a barracks at Reveille. Mike clenched his teeth. He knew every second of dead air on the radio stretched the tension. The dispatcher's hiss could cut in any moment, bringing an okay or an alert, and that sound would hit as final as the first shot in hostile territory. Somebody had to move before the frequency decided for everyone. Mike gripped his phone like a last resort. "General Phillips, this is Mike from Riverside Station. They've got Harold Briggs on the curb, sir. Maple and Pine." "Yeah, the same Briggs." In the patrol car terminal, they confirmed. No warrants. Pickup only with expired registration. Nothing stolen. Just old paperwork. "Close it," the sergeant ordered. "Cite him for registration, plate, and equipment." 3 violations? That's over $900. Rules are rules. Ticket books were still being opened when a roar of tires shattered the calm intersection. A black SUV braked hard. Government plates, uniformed driver. Eyes met. "Federal?" An officer whispered. "Maybe FBI?" The door opened before anyone answered. A man with straight posture, metals gleaming, raised his hand for silence. "This man, Harold Briggs, taught me how to lead," the general said. "Fort Bragg, 1983. He led a recon that pulled my whole platoon out of a swamp when we lost comms." His aide, leather briefcase with a presidential seal tucked under his arm, stayed still. Word spread faster than engine noise. High-ranking brass had stepped onto the quietest corner in town. Within minutes, neighbors dropped grocery bags, kids hopped on bikes, and a curious circle closed in on the scene, waiting for the next move. Cell phone cameras pointed at the dented old pickup and the man standing tall beside it. In the chatter, a retired mailman leaned toward his wife. "For years he'd left extra stamps for Mr. Briggs," he whispered. A cop tried to excuse himself, saying nobody had told him who the driver was. "Because you never asked," General Phillips cut in, appearing by the cruiser. Without waiting for a reply, he turned to the man before him. "Sergeant Major, need a hand?" Harold Briggs stood up unaided, adjusting his cap. "Permission granted, sir." Phillips eyed the officers. "You treated a veteran with 3 combat tours and 40 years of service like a suspect. That pickup isn't just a truck. It carries chapters of our history." The murmur swelled. The general raised his voice. "This is what happens when we forget to teach respect." Near the fence, a little girl tugged her mom's sleeve. "Is he famous?" "Better than that, honey. He's real." A cop took off his sunglasses and stepped forward. "Sir, I apologize." Harold shook his head. "Save the apologies for the next vet before you judge." Phillips snapped a salute. Briggs returned it. The 4 stars gleamed as the general announced for all to hear. "This man led the mission that freed 23 hostages in the Colombian jungle in 1986. Still think he's just another old-timer?" He went back on active duty at 60, right after 9/11. He didn't choose a comfy desk. He chose the mud, teaching commandos how to survive when everything goes south. 3 presidents have shaken his hand. The reports on his missions stay sealed until 2075. The Air Force called him when 18 pilots were trapped on an ice-covered peak. They all came home thanks to a method he sketched on a napkin. While a sergeant tried to impound the old Chevy for lack of papers, a nurse broke in. Mr. Briggs donated blood every month for 3 decades, never missed once. The general beside her lifted his chin toward the rusty pickup. That truck crossed Hurricane Andrew's floodwaters in '92, hauling IV bags to people who had nothing left. The cop took a deep breath. "I'm just following protocol," he muttered. The reply cut through the air. "Protocol?" Briggs wrote the nighttime extraction manual you study at the academy. Harold stayed still, face carved by time, hands buried in his pockets. A slight shrug said everything he wouldn't say out loud. Then from the small crowd a woman stepped forward. "He built the ramp that lets my husband leave the house after his stroke," she said. "He didn't take a cent." And on the sidewalk the silence spoke louder than any metal. Another voice broke the tension. "Last summer he taught survival knots to my son's Boy Scouts." Another neighbor, leaning on a cane, added, "Every Wednesday he takes supplies to the senior center." General Phillips tilted his head. He knew Master Sergeant Briggs couldn't stand by when someone needed help. Around them, more than 50 onlookers raised their phones. Within minutes, the headline was all over social media. 4-star general stands up for veteran harassed by police. The youngest officer, face burning, stepped up to Harold. "Sir, I'm here to apologize for my disrespect." Harold raised his hand, cutting him off. "None of that, kid. That's exactly the point. You can't tell who someone is just by looking. So it's respect first, questions later." Philip signaled to his aide, who handed him a folder. The general gave the document to the lieutenant. "Master Sergeant Briggs's service record, declassified version. Read it before your shift's over." The officer took the file without looking up. Then Phillips pointed at the old pickup. "The Department of Defense classifies it as a historic vehicle. The paperwork hits your district every year. Might be worth checking the records next time." The silence that followed was filled only by camera clicks, recording every detail of the lesson no one there planned to forget. Harold spoke up, calm and steady. "General, these officers acted the way they thought was right. The whole burden doesn't fall on them." "Elaborate, Master Sergeant." "We've built a system that values badges and uniforms over the people wearing them. Protocols replace judgment. I saw it in Vietnam. Kids following orders with no context." The general nodded slowly. "Always the teacher, huh, Harold?" A faint smile crossed the veteran's face. "Until the day you bury me, sir." Hours later, police headquarters put out a statement. Soon the country was talking. Legendary general detained, defends former mentor. The mayor turned June 4th into Harold Briggs Day. Donations poured in from everywhere, $247,000 in the first week alone. Harold put every cent into building ramps for wheelchair-bound vets nationwide. The Harold Briggs Initiative was born, with more than 300 homes already waiting for upgrades. On the corner where it all started, a bronze plaque says, "Not every uniform gets the spotlight, but every act of service leaves a legacy." Harold kept driving the same pickup, nailing boards and tightening screws. The difference was that now, whenever he showed up, nobody ignored him. People stepped aside with respect, curious about his next move. A few weeks went by before one of the cops came back to Harold's door. His eyes carried something you can't fit in a police report: guilt. He sat at the table, took the coffee, and asked for forgiveness. Harold listened in silence and answered with just one line: "Learn fast or someone pays dearly." That was sermon enough. Back at the precinct, Officer Brian Keller turned his discomfort into duty. He ordered every rookie to read Harold's file before pinning on a badge. The lesson jumped fences, crackled over patrol radios, and in days the video of the encounter had 8 million views. Veterans groups mobilized. The phrase, "You don't know who you're stopping," became a motto. While the internet boiled, Harold kept tightening screws. That summer he finished his 23rd ramp for a Gulf War veteran. Quiet work, no interviews. Brian didn't disappear either. He started sweeping the VFW hall every Saturday. He showed up shy, surrounded by hard stares. After all, he was the cop who treated a hero like a perp. Harold's approval cracked the first smile. One of those nights, patching leaks on the roof, Harold put down his hammer and looked at the rookie. "Why did you come back?" Brian took a deep breath, smelling wet wood, and confessed, "I realized I didn't know the people I swore to protect. 4 years in uniform and I'd never set foot in here." The sheriff shook up the department's routine and launched a mandatory course. Recognize and honor those who wore the uniform before you. At the first class, Harold, invited against his will, looked over the rookies and dropped just 11 words. Duty doesn't end with the uniform, and respect for it doesn't either. 3 months passed. One afternoon, General Phillips showed up in jeans and a plain shirt, no trumpets, no medals. He sat with Harold on the wooden porch, 2 glasses of whiskey between them, muted laughter and fireflies dotting the dusk. "You managed to turn this around, old friend," Harold shrugged. "Wasn't me, they just needed a mirror." The next morning, the old pickup creaked down Main Street again, loaded with boards, hammers, and sometimes a flag-draped coffin for a veteran with no family. Now, though, when the engine rumbles, cruisers don't jump ahead to ticket. They line up on the shoulder, lights flashing in salute. Further on, at the academy, every recruit gets a laminated card, 6 bold words worth more than any lecture. You never know who you're stopping. The instructor pauses, letting the silence fill the room before sealing the envelope. Outside the window, the pickup disappears in the dust, and whoever's watching wonders who'll be the next to need that quiet respect.